Now, the company that I want to talk about, and it's been a while since I've spoken about a company, is pretty prolific in the space of which they're in. And the company is called Stripe.
This is a good one.
Yeah, I think it is a good one.
Yeah.
Interesting company. It's one of these companies that has their fingers in most things commercially. But I guess if this space is not interesting to you, sort of the startup finance space, it might not necessarily be something that you're aware of. So, there was a lot of talk about Stripe going public. One of the interesting anecdotal sort of recent experiences with a friend of ours was kind of thinking that he might be able to get like an early buy-in for like an IPO, and it turned out to be a scam. And so there's a lot of different sources saying a lot of different things about whether or not they would go public, and probably they would have by now, maybe, had the market not have gone into a relatively serious recession. But they are still a private company. So, did you know it was started by two brothers?
I didn't know.
Yeah, started by two brothers, 17 and 19 when they first started it. And both of them went to MIT. Although, interestingly enough for Dave, who's our editor, who is an Irishman, these two founders are from Ireland, is my understanding. And so shout out to our Irish startup geniuses. One of them at MIT studied electrical engineering and computer science, which seems relevant.
Makes sense, yeah.
And the other studied physics, which is interesting. And so I wrote a few things down about them. So the names of those guys are John and Patrick Collison. I believe Patrick, I could be wrong, but I believe Patrick is still currently the CEO. And so some interesting things. So for those who aren't aware, Stripe, their focus is basically to simplify the payment processing of transactions for businesses predominantly online. So this is the sort of transformation that we saw online when it went from originally having to use these clunky systems of inputting your card information, getting a million verifications that might be a bank's system or whatever it was previously, to now there's really sleek, streamlined systems of quickly verifying, your identity as a person, as a non-fraudulent transaction, and then making whatever purchases you want to make. And I'll talk a little bit about how they do that sort of surface level. So previously, this industry was very much dominated by a few major players, but mostly being banks and financial services companies. And the process, the interesting thing here is really the customers of Stripe are not consumers, obviously. The customers are the businesses, right? And so when we talk about making payments processes simple, yes, we do mean simple for the consumer, but really what they mean is simple for businesses to integrate into their platform.
Yeah, because they want to put the code into their payments, and they want to have something that just collects payments easily.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you've had a bit of experience in this world now, and one of the things, one of the first things you know about Stripe is that they're famous for this just very simple couple of line code that allows you to input or allows you to have like sort of a plugin that allows you to take payment processing on your website or whatever you're building. So it's kind of interesting. So they offer a few other products now, sort of ancillary to that, which is, they can do multiple currencies. They can do reoccurring payments, subscriptions, which I think is important a lot nowadays. And they also do some integrations with physical card readers in brick and mortar stores. Originally it was called Dev/Payments. I assume that's sort of when it was sort of in the garage stage of when it was being built.
Yeah.
And so
much better name now.
Well, the question begs, or the question begging to be asked is, well, why Stripe? Any guesses?
My guess.
What does it make you think when you think of Stripe?
I think of strip on the back of the credit card, and so that's
correct. That was the initial reference point. That's actually exactly what the yeah.
Okay, well, all right. I didn't mean to guess it. Exactly.
No, so that's exactly right. So the reference was stripes, or the stripe on the back of a credit card.
Yeah. Okay.
But what are the feelings that are evoked when you think of the word Stripe?
I think of like maybe a race car.
Okay, and what's some attributes of a race car?
Fast.
Yeah,
fast, quick.
Okay. Quick.
Efficient.
Very good. Streamlined.
Uses a lot of fuel.
Exactly right. So that's exactly what they wanted. So there was this concept of it sort of having a nod to the previous generation of credit cards. And it was also invoking feelings of streamlined, straightforward, as you said, efficient, quick, all those things. So yeah, that's exactly right. So the founders, so it was founded in 2010. As I said, Patrick and John, they went to MIT. They've been featured in the 30 under 30 on Forbes list. And at this point, they're now, as I said, they're originally from Ireland, but it's now obviously headquartered in San Francisco, and there's more than 8,000 employees. So it's a pretty big operation. So really, what's the specific value proposition? As I sort of said, it's twofold. It's easy integration for the business. So if they're creating a website and they've got their developer working on that, they're able to easily integrate that in using basic, coding. Clearly, I know a lot about that stuff. But more importantly, or maybe as importantly, is the interface that comes alongside it. So it gives them a bunch of really usable dashboard information. And so some of that is things like, and it can be accessed from any device, phone, anything that has internet for these business owners. Things like number of transactions, quantity or amount of processed transactions within a period, things about managed minimum subscriptions. So
are we talking about the data collection side for the business?
The business owner, exactly right. Yeah. So it's what does it provide them as a dashboard or as a database? Recurring payments information. So that's gathering information on all of these people, whether it's email addresses or phone numbers, and creating a database for all of that stuff, which I think is as valuable as the original integration process. On top of that, it provides quite a robust and secure payments method. And I'll talk a little bit about how it uses AI technology to do that, just very briefly.
We love AI.
We do. So I listened to Lex Fridman a little bit, as much as I can. Very long form podcast, so it's difficult sometimes to keep up. And it's interesting. Some people talk about ML or AI. Basically means the same thing, machine learning or, I don't know, artificial intelligence. I don't really know if there's actually an official difference, but it seems like it's interchangeable. So basically, they profess to, and I suppose CommBank maybe would have similar things. They profess to have specific algorithms that detect fraud in real time.
Not that that's where I work or anything.
No. But, you're a customer, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm a customer. Yeah, that's what I meant.
And so they have this machine learning algorithms that can detect fraud in a real time, apparently.
So if I can interject
please do,
PayPal had a huge issue with fraud originally because they were making a small percentage of money off each transaction.
Yes,
and that was fantastic.
Similar, very similar.
But as soon as a fraud charge came up, so let's say they process 700 transactions and they take 1% of that, right?
Yep.
As soon as there's a $70 fraud, all of that gain from that 700 transactions is wiped out because they made $70 from 700 transactions. And so that would be 10%, but they were making huge losses on each one, and
because of the fraud.
And in every 1,000 transactions, there's going to be some maybe one fraudulent.
Because the expectation is they have to pay the business owner back for the fraud.
Yeah, well, the expectation is that they're trying to build a service that people want to use.
Yeah.
And if there's fraud, and there's probably some kind of licensing around it as well, and regulation that they have to pay back.
Yeah.
But they have to cover that while they claim it, or they have to cover that while they and not actually get anything back for it. So they were actually losing heaps of money for fraudulent transactions. And so they had to think of a solution to that as well. So
well, obviously
it's something that everyone's
obviously it's important.
Yeah.
So as you say, so they use machine learning, and some of the ways they do that, some examples of methods used to detect fraud in real time. Simple things that you'd expect. So obviously transaction amount, location, and product type. So a question that will be asked in real time is, does the transaction deviate from a normal purchasing pattern? E.g., is it a large purchase from an unusual location? Another one which is interesting is obviously it can also, when you're using Stripe across multiple platforms, it's aware of cards being used on multiple purchases across different platforms. And so the question that it can ask is, well, is there a drastic change in the particular customer's spending habits across platforms? Or is there a history of fraud connected that they're aware of to this particular account? And that's particularly helpful when they have such a large market share of payment processes online. So they've obviously got a good purview of what's actually going on there in that view. the other way they use AI technology is customer insights on that dashboard that I was talking about. So they can also provide their business owners with customer analysis and insights into their behavior and their preferences. So they know what products they're buying. They know the frequency of purchase. They know the time of day that they're purchasing. And they can also identify common complaints. So they can identify common areas or even common products that are getting complained about or ratings and stuff like that. And so they can provide sort of the fraud detection, as you mentioned, which is so important to even what sounds like even the business model of what's going on here at Stripe. And then also there's customer insights on
that's really good data platform for people that are trying to use stuff to try and optimize their sites and get better.
Exactly right. Yeah. And so, so in regards to partnerships, I think this is interesting. So this is large notable businesses that use Stripe. For those of you who still aren't aware of what Stripe is, just to give you a bit of an idea of what's behind a lot of these companies. Shopify is obviously the big one. We talked about that on episode 17 if you want a more in-depth view on that. WooCommerce, which is another alternative. In regards to the financial services sector, they've established partnerships with Visa, MasterCard, and American Express. And I'll talk a little bit about how that works from a business perspective in a second. Software, Salesforce, everyone knows Salesforce, and Zendesk, which is a little similar in the business SaaS world. In regards to healthcare, companies called CVS and Walgreens, which are both American, but they're equivalent to a Chemist Warehouse or a Priceline pharmacy here in Australia.
Yeah, all our American listeners will know the CVS and
they will.
Walgreens, yeah.
I was going to say, whenever I see Wahlburgers, it reminds me of Walgreens. I literally just did it.
Wahlburgers.
Do you know Wahlburgers?
Yeah, like Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, his burger shop. Sorry. That's so funny.
Classic.
Non-profits, American, even like America's Red Cross, Oxfam, and education providers, Udemy, the course provider, they use it as well. So some big heavy hitters in the world of electronic payments. So in regards to their business model, I'll talk a bit more about their fees here. So the services, as I said, are basically payment processing, fraud detection, and a few other business management tools on their dashboard, etc. And so the fee structure is a combination, as with a lot of products in this nature, a combination of a variable rate, which is based on the percentage of the transaction, and then a fixed amount just to capture some of those maybe potentially really small transactions. And so that's per transaction. And it is worth mentioning that there would be certain players who would have negotiated custom rates and business plans with Stripe, although a lot of smaller players they will have a fixed rate. And I can't tell you a specific percentage for two reasons. One, because it changes depending on where the transaction originates from and in what currency the transaction is done in. And so additional fees that could be incurred or could be a source of revenue potentially for international payments, interchange of currency, refunds. If customers are processing refunds, that's also another source of revenue. And the other one here that I wrote down is interchanging fees, which is they basically just pass on. So obviously card issuers, like as I said, like Visa and MasterCard, they have a fee per transaction as well. And so they would be charging Stripe in this situation. And so Stripe passes that on directly to the business on a separate line item. So that's not necessarily an expense that they just incur, which is interesting to know. As I said, they're not publicly listed, so there's limited financial information online. Although allegedly, according to a couple of sources, they have been profitable since 2018. And so that's really when things really started to kick off. As I said, they were founded in 2010. So there was quite a period of building in that period.
And that's why they've got such a crazy high valuation as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's exactly right. It's a bit of a money printer. So a couple of competitors. You mentioned one. PayPal would certainly be considered a competitor. Maybe less and less the more time goes on. And so another one is Square, which we mentioned Square in episode 7. You can go back and have a look at that if you're more interested in what they do. Square.
You've done your research on this one.
Are you surprised?
No, I am. I mean, no, I'm not.
Tell me what you really think.
No. I mean, this is great. Yep.
You never do this much research. So Square, as I mentioned, episode 7, they provide a more broad array of business management and financial products, and the final competitor is WePay, which is a real thing. And so
it's a real thing, all right.
And so that's my overview of Stripe. I think it's a really interesting company. It's something that we should touch on again if and when they go public, and we can dive into their financials a little bit further, because they could be a really interesting company to actually own. Because I think a lot of people, as you said, see it as a sort of a pretty good investment. It's a bit of a money printing machine. It's sort of the best in the business. There doesn't seem to be anyone who's really competing strongly with them. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on Stripe?
Yeah. So I remember in 2021, there were people who were talking about a public valuation of $90 billion, which is insane because it was one of the highest IPOs ever, or if not the highest IPO ever.
Yep.
And so it was a gigantic listing, and so all these people were still trying to. All these people that are working there are still holding on as well because
that's a good point.
They don't want to leave before they've IPO'd. No. And obviously the market went a bit south after 2021.
Yes.
And so then they're not going to IPO yet. So all these people are still, holding onto their shares and whatever. Yes. And I'm sure plenty of them still want to be there. It's not like it's a dead startup. I think they all pretty much would believe in the valuation. It's just that now the valuation wouldn't be able to fetch that. In the current market, so they're obviously waiting until we have a proper, another bull market.
It's true.
Yeah, very cool company.
Very cool company. I love it. A couple of brothers. So there you go.
Yeah,
a couple of brothers from Ireland.
That's great.
Love it.